Welcome everyone to Exploring with Cindy and Dan. Today we're arriving in Florence, Oregon, and we're going to look at some historical sites in what is considered Old Town Florence. Florence has a really exciting downtown area that is fun for the whole family. Join us in this adventure. The Siuslaw River Bridge is one of the most amazing bridges located on the Oregon coast on Highway 101 in Florence, Oregon. The bridge's total length is 1,568 feet, and when it's opened, the 140-foot bridge provides 110 feet of horizontal clearance for boat traffic. This is a picture of the first cars, bicycles, and pedestrians that crossed the Siuslaw Bridge on March 31, 1936, in a parade after 20 months of construction. The bridge raises to allow marine traffic like fishing boats and sailing vessels with tall masts. In the past, the bridge opened mainly for barges carrying lumber for the local sawmill that used to be in downtown Florence. The bridge was built as part of the Coastal Bridges Project. This project consists of 5 coastal bridges that includes the Siuslaw River Bridge and was built during the Great Depression from 1934 to 1936. The construction of the bridge began in August 5th of 1934, and it cost around $500,000 to complete, an equivalent of $10.4 million in 2021. Now with the new way of travel across the Siuslaw River, Florence was fully connected to the Oregon Coast Highway system. The old way of travel across the river was to take a ferry, and in fact you can still see the old post sticking out of the water where the ferry used to depart from, which is near the bridge. The smaller building in the picture used to be called Slim Brown's Pool Hall. It was built in the late 1940s. This structure housed a pool hall and poker parlor through the 1960s. It was renovated and a second story added in 1990. And next door was Addie's Cafe for many years, and it was remodeled in the mid-1970s. Currently, it's a hair salon. This is the Kyle Building. It was built in 1901 by William Kyle, and it was used as a mercantile store until 1961. This building was placed on the National Register of Historic Buildings in 1981, and currently it is used as a restaurant. This building here we're looking at was built in 1938 as the Florence Theater. After an internal fire in 1957, the building was refurnished and renamed the Harbor Theater, one of the last neighborhood theaters operating in Oregon. It continued dispensing candy bars, popcorn, and movies until it closed in 2003. In May of 2004, the historical building was transformed into a shoe store. Built by O.W. Hurd around 1905, this structure was Florence's first telephone office, starting operations in 1912. Switchboards were downstairs, operator quarters on the second floor. Its design is a good example of early commercial architecture with scrolled cornice brackets along the false front. This here is the Florence Rooming House, built around 1910. This building served Florence as a boarding house and later as the Old Town Rooms. The second-story bay windows are original and were uncommon in coastal construction outside of urban centers such as San Francisco. Restoration commenced in the 1980s for commercial and residential use. This building was constructed in 1892 and enlarged to its present size in 1907. This West Coast-style Victorian building served as a doctor's office, boarding house, and private residence. For decades the home of Milo and Cora Johnson, until in 1981 it was restored as a bed and breakfast, remaining so until 2003. These are signs that shows the distance of other cities named Florence. This is the Siuslaw Pioneer Museum, located on the corner of Maple and 2nd Street. Since we are filming on Christmas Day, the museum is closed. We've been in this museum a couple of years ago and it was very interesting. It preserves the local history of Florence and the Siuslaw region. As always, every time we visit any museum, we are transported through time, and this museum is no exception. The exhibits shows the life from before settlers made their way to the Siuslaw region, up to their life in the 1950s. It also tells you the story of the life of those who started the logging and fishing industries in the mid to late 1800s. It was originally built in 1905 as a schoolhouse. It's a two-story building that includes a bell tower and twin dormers. In 1953 a fire destroyed the second floor, and until 1989 it was a wholesale greenery. This is the port of Siuslaw, established in 1909 with an economy built on fishing, canning, and lumber. The history of this port begins with Native Americans, such as the Siuslaw tribe, who lived along the bank of the Siuslaw River. The boardwalk at the port of Siuslaw overlooks the commercial basin, a wonderful place where you can stroll and relax. The little floating house that you see is Novelist Crab and Seafood. It's a floating fish market that sells fresh seafood and clam chowder. Between the third weekend in May through the summer, the Port of Siuslaw features the Siuslaw Vendor Market on the boardwalk, where you can find organic fruit and vegetables from our local farmers. Also in May, Florence has the annual Rhododendron Festival. It's the second longest running floral festival in Oregon. You will find a carnival going on the boardwalk, classic car shows and crews, and motorcycles and street vendors at the fair. Every July, Florence celebrates the 4th of July in the historic Old Town with family, fun games, pie and watermelon contests, food, drink, music, and one of the best fireworks shows on the coast. In September, the weekend after Labor Day, Florence has the annual Rods and Roadies. You will find more than 100 of the West Coast most amazing hot rods and custom cruisers all weekend long. The annual Florence Holiday Festival is going on the first week of December with music, warm beverages, and Santa's arrival. The light blue building, called the Lockers, constructed sometime after 1915. This building served as a drugstore and later a butcher shop. The rear section was added in the early 1940s, housing meat lockers until the 1950s. From 1968 until renovated in its present state, it was known as Phil's. This little building here was Bill's Garage, constructed in 1944. This building fell into the mud flats during the storm in 1951 and winched back in place as it stands today. For half a century, 1944 to 1995, until his death at 89, this corrugated metal and wood structure was Bill's auto and outboard motor garage, and currently it's one of my favorite coffee shops on the Oregon coast. This building here, called the Mapleton Depot, constructed in 1912, this Southern Pacific Railroad depot served Mapleton, the town of Mapleton, a community 15 miles east of Florence. With the widening of Highway 126 in 1976, it was saved from demolition by local contractor Mike Johnson and rebuilt on the present site by Jim Alexander in 1977. The Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area is located on the Oregon coast, and it stretches approximately 40 miles north of the Coos River in North Bend to the Siuslaw River in Florence. They are the largest sand dunes in North America and one of the largest expanses of tempered coastal dunes in the world, with sand dunes reaching 500 feet above sea level. The transportation of goods up and down the Siuslaw River was made possible because of the construction of the north and south jetties. Assembly of the jetties began in the early 1890s with the assistance of the Army Corps of Engineers and federal funding. Thank you for exploring Florence with us, and please consider subscribing to our channel with the notification bell on. Florence, as well as the cities of Newport and Reedsport, have these sea lion statues. They are called dancing sea lion projects. They were placed throughout the city to celebrate the 20 years of Florence Event Center.